In 1917, about 20 years after ownership of Puerto Rico was passed from Spain to the United States, Congress granted American citizenship to Puerto Ricans. As a result, more and more Puerto Ricans moved to the American mainland hoping to escape crushing poverty. Among the migrants was Jesus Colón. That same year, he boarded a ship to New York City, the center of Puerto Rican migration to the United States. There he became a prolific writer and activist, widely recognized as a public voice of the early Puerto Rican community. Jesus Colón published hundreds of articles throughout his lifetime. A Puerto Rican in New York and Other Sketches is a collection of 55 of these. They depict the development of the Puerto Rican community in New York from 1917 to the book's publication in 1961 and cover a wide range of topics. In this video, I'll try to address the most important points. Though a proficient writer in both Spanish and English, Colón chose to write his book in English in order to reach a broader American audience. His aim was to help mainstream Americans better relate to Puerto Rican immigrants and their struggles in the United States. At the same time, Colón hoped to combat widespread false perceptions of Puerto Ricans. One way Puerto Ricans were put in their place, so to speak, was through the racist media. In the titular story, Colón talks about reactionary papers against Puerto Ricans coming to New York, which describe Puerto Ricans in the worst light they can imagine. Such language was a backlash to the post-war immigration boom and designed to sell more newspapers by playing on the fears of mainstream Americans. Puerto Ricans were not passive recipients of this discriminatory rhetoric. They organized letter-writing campaigns, published articles, and ran programs, all with the purpose of countering the media's assault on their characters. It was with similar intentions that Colón wrote The Library Looks at the Puerto Ricans. In the sketch, he argues that the public library's recommendations fail to do justice to Puerto Rican history and ignore important works written by Puerto Ricans. Puerto Rican immigrants had to reconcile the grand promises of the American dream with the reality of day-to-day discrimination. Sometimes the pressures took the form of reactionary violence, like in the story Because He Spoke in Spanish. Colón describes the case of a Puerto Rican veteran who was brutally murdered for speaking Spanish in a public space. In another sketch, Colón argues that parents of Puerto Rican immigrants should not follow their children to the United States because the danger of reactionary violence is only one of many ways life in America will disappoint. However, Colón also uses reactionary violence as a rallying point for Puerto Rican political action. He calls on Puerto Ricans to mobilize and speak out, saying, "Let us not be silent wherever we are, and wherever our voice or our written word is needed for the defense of a just cause. We are sure that if only one decent American would have firmly spoken that night at the bar where Bernabe was murdered, the hands of the young thugs would perhaps have been stopped." For Colón, Puerto Rican ethnic identity was defined by opposition to American imperialism and class oppression. Colón was well aware of the role American corporations and government policy had played in shaping the lives of Puerto Ricans on the island and the mainland. Somehow in New York, I did not seem to find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that I was so sure I would find in my dreams while in Puerto Rico. The same American trust that exploited us in Puerto Rico were in control in New York. A staunch communist, Colón believed that participation in the democratic process and labor organization were the keys to solving the problems faced by Puerto Ricans. It was through unions and progressive activism that he hoped to end the suffering caused by unregulated capitalism and widespread racism. Colón's communist beliefs were hardly baseless. In the late 50s, anti-communist efforts brought Puerto Rican political organizations to their knees. Without the unions and other leftist groups, there was no place in the Puerto Rican community independent enough of mainstream America to grow new, capable leaders. In summary, the sketches of Jesus Colón represent a broad communist view of Puerto Ricanness in 1950s New York. They reflect the discrimination faced by Puerto Ricans, but also show how Puerto Ricans resisted imperialist, capitalist, and racist forces. A Puerto Rican in New York has too much content and depth to cover in 5 minutes. To learn more, I'd advise reading the collection itself and the following articles for historical context. I found them to be helpful in the making of this video, and I hope you'll also find them pretty interesting.